Well, it says we're live. Hello, everyone. It's Tuesday. It's 4 o'clock Pacific, 6 o'clock Central, 6 o'clock here in Costa Rica, 7 o'clock on the East Coast, midnight in Dublin, 1 a.m. in Italy, 8:30 and 9:30 a.m. Wednesday morning in Australia. And I think it's about 3 in the afternoon in New Zealand on Wednesday, and it's Facebook Live. And we have my very good friend, Dr. Liz Lipski, with us today, who is the go-to person in the functional medicine world on digestive function. And we're going to be talking a lot of pearls today about digestion and how we can enhance our digestion and how important is digestion. So first, let me say, Liz, thank you so much for being here today.
Tom, thanks for having me here. I'm so glad to just see your beautiful face and have this time to be with you, and got to see Marzi too. You know, it's just good to spend time with a real friend.
Oh, thank you. Yes, I feel the same. I was excited for today, knowing that we'd have a chance to connect, And by the way, for everyone out there, don't ever social distance. There's no such thing as beneficial social distancing. Maybe physical distancing is okay. Maybe for some people it's a benefit to physically distance to protect yourself, but never, ever social distance. And as Liz is just saying, so nice to see your face again. I realized I haven't talked to Liz in months, and we've been inadvertently socially distant, because we're not crossing paths at seminars like we usually do and that kind of thing. But it just reminds me to tell everyone, if you're stuck at home or if you're avoiding going out and making contact, every day, reach out to one person in your memory banks of somebody you haven't talked to in a while. You've got a cell phone, you can text them, you can FaceTime them, it's free anywhere in the world. You can Zoom meeting with them. Reach out to your family and your friends and just stay connected. Most important during this time of crisis that we're going through. Most important. And usually I get started with saying hello to people on Facebook, but my Facebook on my phone doesn't work. And Marzi's in the other room with Gio, so I don't know what to do with this. So I can't say hello to people who are out there. But you're welcome to start posting your questions. And to get started, I'm just going to start with Liz asking you the question, because we're talking to a lot of people that haven't had medical training. And exactly what is digestion? What are we talking about when we say digestion?
Great beginning question. So I love digestion. I consider you a digestive expert also. There's something so fascinating about it. And the whole reason that we eat in the first place is to get nutrients to every single cell in the body. So we start by thinking about, well, what did I eat and was that good quality? And for a lot of people, what we're eating is not good quality, and there's a lot we can do there. But for a lot of people, digestion is supposed to work really well, and we're not supposed to notice it very much. And so if you have heartburn, or you have gas, or you have bloating, or you are constipated, or have diarrhea or pain anywhere, something's going on with your digestive system. And for me, it's such an interesting look and exploration at all the different parts of it. Like, what's your esophagus doing, and what's your stomach doing? And do you have, I'm sure you've heard with Dr. Tom over and over about, the damage that can happen to the gut lining. And so, looking at the microbiome, looking at people's lifestyles, and just kind of making sure that this river of life, which is our digestive system, works so that we can feel vibrant and energetic. And so it encompasses like everything from your mouth and your teeth all the way down to your anus, plus your pancreas and your gallbladder and your liver even, so it's really a big organ. And it's about 28 feet long, just kind of the length. It's a pretty big space, and it's almost like a hose that runs through our body, that once it distills what we need. All the good stuff goes into our bloodstream, and the waste disappears. So it can break down in a lot of different ways and be inflamed in a lot of different places. And finding ways that people can help rebalance that always is the most interesting.
That's very comprehensive. Thank you. That's a really good start. And my team is posting some of the messages. Kelly's here from Indiana. Amanda's here from Sydney, Australia. Dilva Henry Scala's here from Aloha from Maui. Thank you. And Liz, you lived on Maui, didn't you, for a while?
I lived on Kauai for 10 years.
On Kauai. Yeah, okay. Alice is here, and Alice has a question. What digestive enzymes are best and how much? So before Liz answers that, Alice, the question that I would ask is, why do we need digestive enzymes? If somebody needs digestive enzymes, the question is, why? What's not working in their digestive system adequately that we need supplements? And if you need supplements, of course, they're really good to take. And you're asking the question, which ones are the best and how much should I take is a very valid question. But I also want to kind of plug into your thought process to explore, maybe with Liz's course that we're going to talk about, or her book. I forgot to say, Digestive Wellness is the Bible for digestion in the functional medicine world. It's about this thick. It started off about this thick, and then it went to here, and then to here, and then to here. How many editions are there now to the book?
5.
5, right.
You got to be a little bit crazy to write the same book 5 times,
That's
but
right.
there's so much more that interests me. I just keep doing it over and over again.
I know, it's great. It's so helpful. It's a great reference book. So to Alice's question, what digestive enzymes are the best and how much?
Okay, but I think we should go back to your first question is, who needs enzymes and why do we need enzymes, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of different reasons for that. I think when somebody's debilitated, they've been sick for a really long period of time, it's like putting an ACE bandage on somebody's sprained ankle. It just gives them some support to be able to digest their food better. And in Chinese medicine, they talk about digestive fire, or in Ayurvedic medicine, Agni, the fire that's there. And some people don't have enough fire to digest their food, poetically. But there's a lot of other things that go on. So first of all, are you actually chewing your food? Second of all,
Well,
are you
let's stay with chewing for a
okay?
minute.
Okay.
Let's give them the example of what chewing should be and why is chewing important.
Well, these teeth, these white things or yellow things, whatever, they're there so that we can really masticate the food. And in the saliva, there's all kinds of enzymes and there's things that begin the process of digestion already. And there's microbes that begin the process of digestion. And so keeping the food in our mouth and chewing it starts that process. And also it breaks the food down into such small particles. One of my mentors, Dr. Russ Jaffe, used to say, drink your liquids and chew your foods. So that by the time you swallow it, it's really liquidy, so that when it gets into the stomach and the small intestine, there's not as much work that needs to be done. And so often people are just rushing to eat, which is the next piece of this, and so we're not really chewing our food that well. We're just kind of washing it down with fluids, and we don't end up being able to digest it that well.
I had the experience back in the 1970s. I lived in Ann Arbor and my hair was down to my waist. And, I was a baker. I was a baker in a health food restaurant, right? The gluten guy.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I was a baker, hand rolling 48 loaves of bread a day of this stone ground whole wheat, unyeasted bread that would rise about 30% with no yeast. I mean, it was great, great bread. I call it a destination bread. People would drive to come get it. But I remember back then, and the world of macrobiotics was pretty popular in my small circle of people. And they talk about chewing your food 30 times. And that when I tried that one time, what a nuisance, but I counted to 30. And what I noticed was food was a lot sweeter in my mouth, that all of a sudden it started tasting sweeter as I was chewing it more and more. Why would that happen?
Well, we have enzymes in the mouth called amylases, and they start breaking down the sugars and carbohydrates. And so that's why the food tastes so sweet after a little while. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, it is. And so that's for everybody to know. One of the reasons to chew your food more is that you have less cravings for sugar because you access the sugar in the foods you're eating. And so that you feel more satisfied for the sugar craving aspect. And you may not need that piece of pie afterwards, right? You may say, I don't need a piece of pie tonight or whatever it should be. But the point is, the enzymes in our mouth start to convert the starches into sugar. And the food tastes better. It tastes better when you do that. And Liz, one more thing about in the mouth. Aren't there some components in the saliva that help us absorb our B vitamins, vitamin B12, and that without those components, isn't it easy to develop a deficiency of B12?
The main thing that we're looking for being able to absorb vitamin B12 is something called intrinsic factor, and it's in the stomach, and it's produced by the parietal cells, which also produce our stomach acid.
Right.
And when we don't have enough of this intrinsic factor, we can't absorb B12, which is why sometimes you'll take B12 sublingually because then it can be absorbed right through under the tongue. It kind of goes right into the bloodstream, which is pretty cool. And the other thing about just the way that we eat is that people used to say grace and they would stop and they would be grateful for their food. And eating is really a parasympathetic dominant act, meaning that it works best when we're relaxed, when we're sitting around a table with friends, when we're just kind of like savoring the moment instead of like, I got to eat because I got to do the next thing and go pick up the kids from school and I'm running
Right.
around and I'm doing all these things. And so I think that's another reason why people need more enzymes. And then the final reason why a lot of times people need enzymes is that when you have the lining of the small intestine is only one cell thick, and it looks like a brush. It looks almost like a little tiny baby toothbrush, although I like to think of it as almost a towel. You know how towels have loops on them, and then the loops have little tiny threads coming out. Those are the villi and the microvilli. And when they're damaged in any way, we don't secrete uh, um, lactase, which is an enzyme to break down milk sugars. We don't secrete other enzymes, and we also don't secrete a hormone called cholecystokinin that sends a message to the pancreas and said, I just ate all these things. Now I need these enzymes to digest them. And so the pancreas doesn't kind of do its job as well. And I think one more reason why sometimes people need enzymes is that they're not digesting fat very well. And you can see that when you have stools that really float, or if they're really pale colored or tan colored or frothy, or you just feel like you don't digest fats very well, that would be another reason to take enzymes.
And so, to the question of which enzymes are best, you're saying that it really depends on what kind of symptoms you're noticing as to which ones to take. Now,
Yeah.
um, I remember reading, there's a book by Dr. Jonathan Wright, Why Hydrochloric Acid is Good for You. I think that's the name of the book. And he talks about how frequent hydrochloric acid deficiencies occur for us. And that's an acid made in the stomach. And because of the stress that we live our lives under and the garbage that we put down into our stomach over the years, we might not make as much hydrochloric acid. Um, uh, is there a danger in taking hydrochloric acid as a supplement
Interesting question. So there are a lot of people I've recommended that they take it,
as well?
but but I've had two people in my like 35 years of practice, who misused their betaine HCl supplements. One stopped eating but kept taking her betaine HCl, and she actually burned a hole in her stomach.
Oh,
She was in a new marriage, and her husband kept telling her that she looked fat, so she started eating less and less and taking more and more betaine HCl, which was not the right thing to do. And then, so she was a great teacher for me. And then I had another teacher, a woman who said, well, I can't remember to take like 2 with every meal, which is how I feel really great. So I just take 6 with one meal. And so she started feeling some burning sensations. I'm like, no. So, more lately, I've been using things like umeboshi plums or bitters to stimulate that. And then also having people relax before they eat. Stress, as you said, is a huge component of why people don't have enough. So the main thing to know with betaine HCl is if you feel worse in any way, either stop taking it or take less of it.
mhm. I used to have people tier up their dosing of HCl. So, you take one with the meal, and the next time you have that same size meal, you take two. Next time you have that same size or amount of food, take three. And you keep tiering it up until you feel some warmth in your tummy. And when you do, okay, that's a little too much. So the next time you have that size meal, back it down by one or two. So if you're up to like six with a meal, which is a fair amount, that's quite a bit, and you get a little warmth in your tummy, drop back down to four and stay there. And maybe in a month or so, you're going to feel warmth in your tummy with that size meal at four. Great. You're making more hydrochloric acid yourself. Drop down to three and just tier it that way. I think that Dr. Wright talked about that in that book of his, Why Hydrochloric Acid is Good for You. And it's on Amazon, and it's still a great read for people who want to learn more about digestion. Maggie's here from Cleveland. Kim says, so many practitioners recommend digestive enzymes. Do we really need them? If we have no problems with meals, what about leaky gut?
I don't take enzymes right now. There have been times in my life where I felt like I was a little bit run down, or maybe I had a little bit of yeast overgrowth or something like that. And I felt like they were really helpful. But, if you're feeling really great, I don't think you need them. But if you're having digestive issues, or you're having energy issues, or you're eating and you just don't feel like you're feeling better after a meal, then you can try them and just see. And, as you probably heard a lot, there are different kinds of enzymes. So there's enzymes that will help you break down gluten, and there's enzymes that'll help you break down fats. They're lipase loaded enzymes, or they're enzymes that are grown on Aspergillus niger, which is a fungus that will work in the stomach as well as throughout the small intestine, and can really help digestion all the way through, but not so good for maybe somebody who has a mold issue. And then there's enzymes that are made from desiccated pancreatic tissue, usually from pigs or cows. And sometimes I would use those for somebody who had diabetes or liver issues, or pancreatic issues. And so there's different kinds of enzymes. And, there's so many good companies that make enzyme products. And, I've seen people say, gee, my energy is just better, or my digestion's is better, or my diarrhea is gone, or my constipation's gone. And then there are other people, it's like, I don't notice anything. If you don't
Yeah.
notice anything, you don't need them.
Yeah. I also don't take digestive enzymes, although I did today because we had a lunch and I was burping and I was belching and I said, well, what's that about? And so I took a bunch of enzymes just to help get that stuff broken down a little faster. But there have been times in my life when I took enzymes on a very regular basis, but it shouldn't be something that needs to be done all the time. If it does, you want to explore, why do I need the enzymes, right? But
Yeah.
for a short-term basis, there's no problems with taking them, as far as I know. We've used them with hundreds of people over the years, and they've all often, almost always, been of benefit. Kat says, I've heard so many times that we're supposed to be chewing our food 40 times for each bite. Is this really true and reasonable?
I don't think it's reasonable.
Yeah, neither do I. I'm not going to do it. I'm not gonna do
I
it.
mean, I've tried it just like you have, but just make sure that you're really chewing your food well. I
Yes.
love the story by John Robbins in May All Be Fed, a really old book, but there was a story in it about people in concentration camps during World War II. And when they really slowed down and they chewed their food really well, their survival rates were much higher. So, the other thing that happens when we take the time to eat a meal is that after about 20 minutes, we start getting satisfied with what we've eaten. And when we're not really paying attention, we're watching TV or we're having fun with people or we're reading while we're eating, it's really easy to overeat or to eat really fast. And so I think slowing down is just great for a lot of reasons, but it would drive me insane to actually have to count 40 bites, 40
Right.
chews.
Right. I agree. I agree. The macrobiotic approach I thought was 30, or at least what I remember was 30 times, but 30 or 40 are in that same ballpark. And I've recommended to people when I've been asked about macrobiotic over the years, I would say, well, it's meant for an Oriental, that's where it comes from. However, if you have cancer or you have a very severe condition, you want to go to the extreme to make sure that you're getting the nutrients out of your food. And in those situations, it makes sense to practice chewing more. You don't have to count 30 times, but you want to be chewing. You want to make sure that you're calm, that, as Liz is saying, it's a parasympathetic dominant state to eat, meaning we're supposed to be relaxed when we're eating and not watching some a shoot 'em up war movie or whatever. We're supposed to be relaxed. It's a time to nourish. And so if you've got a degenerative disease, for those people, the extra effort to be counting 10 times, maybe, I don't know. I'm making up the number. Maybe for you, the benefits will be at 8, maybe at 15 chews for a food. But you can tell once you get into this rhythm, of chewing more, you find that it affects the entire digestive process. Now, one thing I thought of that I wanted to mention is who are the people that really benefit from taking digestive enzymes? And as Dr. Lipski said, it's, if you got a problem with digestion, then it may be a benefit, but you also then want to ask, why do I have a problem with digestion? And that leads into Quincy's question, which is, my Genova test says I have trouble breaking down protein. Is this a concern?
Yeah. I mean, protein's so important for so many different reasons. We have about 22 pounds of protein and muscle in our bodies. And if you're not digesting protein well, and it's kind of putrefying in your gut, it's not a good situation. We make hormones like insulin and thyroid hormone and so many other things out of it. So it's really important. And that takes us back to the stomach again, because the initial part of digestion of proteins takes place in the stomach with that acid. So you might want to try just having, try that betaine HCl test that Dr. Tom was talking about, or you might want to try using some Swedish bitters and see, just maybe 30 drops with a meal and see if that's helpful. There's another kind of self-test you can do to see if you have enough stomach acid, and that's to take about a half a teaspoon in about 2 ounces of of water, put some baking soda in there, just half a teaspoon in a couple ounces of water, and then drink that and see what happens. And if you have enough stomach acid, you ought to start getting that belching, burping kind of stuff going on within about 5 minutes. So it's pretty interesting. We have lots of different ways to kind of test it. And so many people do feel better when they get their stomach acid up. The other thing that I would say is, I think it's more important to notice how you feel than to read some kind of a test result. Tests are important when we put them into the context of the person. So do you feel like food sits in your stomach for a long time? Do you feel like you have great energy? Probably you did the stool test because, for a reason. And so you have to kind of look at that. People who don't have enough protein, one of the tricks I learned from Jonathan Wright is to actually take your hair like this and do that. And people who have plenty of protein, their hair doesn't fall out in their hands. But when they don't, you get, like 10 or 15 hairs in your hand. People who don't have enough protein get sick easily, or they have slow healing from cuts and burns and little things that bother them, mosquito bites and things like that. So, you know, you have to take all of this like together with who you are as a person and not just the test result. But yes, if I saw you didn't have enough protein, you weren't digesting it well, then you might be somebody who would do really well with digestive enzymes or stomach acid.
Fully agree, fully agree. And one of the markers that you can use on are the enzymes working for you is how are your bowel movements? Do you have really great bowel movements? Bowel movements, you should have bowel movements say, oh man, that felt great. That's how it's supposed to be, right? And well-formed, easily evacuated bowel movements. And if you're not having that, there's a reason. There's something wrong in the tube, right? And often it's the balance of digestive enzymes that are contributing to that. So if you have a protein deficiency and you start taking digestive enzymes and you notice your bowel movements are getting better, wow, that was great. That's a good sign. That means right now that you probably will benefit with continuing to take the enzymes. And of course, anytime you have a test that comes back and suggests there's a problem, you always want to go back and recheck 3 months or 6 months later to make sure the problem's been completely fixed, because your symptoms can go down while there's still 20%, 30% of a problem there. And then it's just going to rear its ugly head somewhere else later on, causing continual degeneration until new symptoms come up. Janquila asks, hi, is olive oil and oils in general bad idea if trying to lower blood sugar, and should you avoid all fats and meats?
That's a big question. So first of all, I love olive oil and I don't avoid fats at all. I just try to make sure that my oils and fats are good quality. So I eat a lot of nuts, I put in seeds, I cook with olive oil or sunflower oil or avocado oil. Some people really like coconut oil. I don't personally love the flavor of it. So, find oils to cook with that work for you, but I wouldn't avoid fats and oils. We make hormones out of these fats. We make fat out of these fats. And for balancing blood sugar, fat burns so much more slowly than carbohydrates and proteins. And so it's much better at helping us balance that blood sugar. So, we've been fed a lot of kind of misinformation about fat. And when I'm concerned about fat is when people are eating fats that come from highly processed foods, because it's the processing of the fat that strips them of all the nutrients and all the good benefits, kind of breaks them down so that they're molecules that aren't as well recognized by the body. And then the body goes, what's this? This doesn't belong here. And then we get inflammation. But please don't be afraid of eating fats and oils and nuts and seeds and whole grains if they're good, if they taste good to you.
Right, right, agreed. And I think where a lot of this comes from is that in our society, we've grown up thinking that I'm too fat. I've got too much fat and I need to lose weight because I'm too fat. And so we associate the word fat with the food fats. And they're different. Fats are not bad for you. Bad fats are bad for you, which is what Dr. Lipski is saying, right? Good fats are really good and essential for you. Your brain needs good fats. When you're rebuilding every cell in your body regenerates, every single cell. And when you're rebuilding brain cells, it's the fats that are the raw material that make up, it's called the membrane, like the wall of every brain cell is made up of fats. And if you don't have enough good fats in your diet, then your brain cells are made out of French fries, right? And bad fats. And then they don't communicate very well together. That's why the studies show when you take attention deficit kids and you start giving them good fats in fish oils, in 6 months, their IQs are more, they're higher. They're functioning better in school because you've changed the function of the brain by changing the new brain cells that are being made, by supplying the right foods to make healthier brain cells that communicate with each other. So I'm in perfect agreement. I would never want to avoid fats. No, no, avoid bad fats. And also with the good fats, when you're cooking, don't let them smoke. If you cook it so high that they smoke, you alter the health benefits of those fats. Dwin says, I have no gallbladder. Do I need digestive enzymes?
Sometimes. Okay, so the thing is, when you don't have a gallbladder, the gallbladder is really a storage place for bile. It's kind of like a suitcase, but it's one that kind of every time we eat a meal that has fat, it contracts and it releases bile, and the liver releases bile. And when we don't have that little suitcase to store and concentrate the bile, then what happens is that our bile just kind of does this drip, drip, drip all day long into the small intestine. And so we don't have kind of this bolus when we eat a meal. So in most people whose gallbladder is removed, they recover really well and they feel better. But if you find that you're having problems digesting fats, then I would recommend using probably either a lipase-loaded digestive enzyme or ox bile, which is concentrated, and it actually gives you a bolus of bile. And bile is so important because it kind of neutralizes the acid that's in our stomach when we don't need it to be acidy in the small intestine anymore. It also, bile is one of our great ways of like pulling cholesterol out of the body. And bile is also how we pull hormones we don't need anymore out of the body. And also it's great at pulling out like pesticides and chemicals and all these other things. So, like if you're finding that your digestion of fats specifically doesn't feel good, then try taking some ox bile or take some digestive enzymes that have lipase in them with meals and see if that makes you feel better. But I would guess that more than 70% of people who've had their gallbladder removed probably don't need to take any enzymes or bile.
Ale asks, hi, how do you improve gallbladder function?
The gallbladder is a quirky instrument, but the things that we know that really help support it are bitter foods. So dandelion greens and broccoli and kale and mustard greens, arugula, things like that, radishes, anything that has kind of a bitter flavor helps us stimulate the production of bile in the liver and can help. Also, I think digestive enzymes can really help support the gallbladder and liver. And then, the other things that really support kind of liver and gallbladder function, things like milk thistle, which you can get as a supplement, but you can also just get the seeds and grind them up and put them on food or put them in a smoothie or something. So, once you have gallstones, then you're in kind of a different area and you may need medical treatment or even removal of your gallbladder. But the other thing, again, we're talking about Jonathan Wright a lot tonight, but what's interesting about him is that he's often said that when people have a lot of problems with their gallbladder, to look for food sensitivities. So you might want to go on a gluten-free, dairy-free, egg-free, sugar-free, alcohol-free, some sort of elimination diet for a couple weeks and see how you feel. Because as you add foods back in, you might find that your digestion or your gallbladder is acting up again. And it's been interesting over time to really see that sometimes it's just another symptom of food reactions, that we're eating foods that our body really dislikes.
In 1996, Dr. Wright started a newsletter called Nutrition and Healing. And I think Dr. Lipski and I both were charter members of that. Oh, Jonathan's writing, great, great. And in one of the issues, he talked about gallbladder, and he talked about a medical doctor, a surgeon named James Brennan, who had written a book, Gallbladder Function. I don't remember the name of the book, but he said that once he started addressing food sensitivities, he didn't do gallbladder surgery anymore. People that had stones or had gallbladder pain, if you could get them through a first day or two of that, then he didn't need to do surgery when he changed their diet. Now, one of the examples of that is that in the lining of your stomach, it's incredible what this single cell lining, everything that it does. But one of the things that it does, it produces a messenger called cholecystokinin. And one of the things that cholecystokinin does is when you eat a meal, if it's a higher fat meal, a certain amount of cholecystokinin gets produced that goes to the gallbladder and says, this amount of fat's here, send some bile down this way. And then cholecystokinin also goes to the pancreas and send some pancreatic enzymes down this way. Well, they published that for those with celiac disease, where the lining of the intestines have been inflamed and compromised, they don't produce enough cholecystokinin. And if they don't produce enough cholecystokinin with the size of the meal that you're eating in terms of the amount of fat in the meal, and you don't make enough cholecystokinin, the messenger to tell the gallbladder what to do, you get reduced gallbladder contraction, increased gallbladder volume. That the bile stays in the gallbladder. It doesn't get the message to get squeezed out. And what happens in your gallbladder when the bile just sits in there for a long time and it's not being used? It starts to dry up. And what do you get? You get stones. And so they published that, Mayo Clinic published a couple of articles on that, that one of the things to look at when you have gallbladder dysfunction is intestinal dysfunction. Is the messenger, cholecystokinin, not being produced in adequate amounts to tell the gallbladder what to do, right? So as Liz was saying, you look for food sensitivities like gluten and dairy and others, and to see, is that contributing to the gallbladder functional problem? Allison asked,
there are a lot of questions I'm just kind of seeing in the chat, and I just want to say something real quickly. The power of some sort of an elimination diet for a month or so is really a miracle for so many people, because the food that we eat is the most inflammatory thing we do every day. We take pounds of this stuff we call food and we put it in our body, and our body has to decide, is this a friend or is this a danger? And that's why somewhere between 70 and 80% of the immune system is in the gut itself, in the digestive system. So when we put somebody, or when you embark on an elimination diet, whether that's a low FODMAP diet because you got a lot of gas and bloating, or whether that's a specific carbohydrate diet, or whether it's just a kind of a really clean diet, with no gluten or eggs or dairy or soy or sugar or colors or alcohol or things like that, what you see often is that people find that somewhere between 60 and 80% of their symptoms are just gone in a couple of weeks. And so that's the power of kind of playing with your food in a way, is that you can see these dramatic changes happen almost overnight. And That's certainly true for people with gluten issues, but it's also true for people with dairy issues or beef issues or egg issues or sugar issues, or really almost any food can be a trigger food. And so it's a kind of an amazing thing. If you've never tried kind of an elimination type diet, it would be so interesting to just do it and see how you feel.
Fully agree. Fully agree. Owl says, my doc tells me he thinks I have parasites because nothing seems to work, and he recommends ignoring food sensitivities. Is he right? Well, um, maybe he's got a link to higher powers and can tell what's wrong with you without doing testing. Maybe he can, but I would never want to ignore food sensitivities. So many people have parasites or too many bad bacteria, and they have food sensitivities. They have both. So I never would want to ignore food sensitivities. If they were identified by when you eat something you don't feel good, or if they were identified by a test that said you have a problem with this food, you don't want to ignore that. But also, you may have parasites. It's so very common to have parasites. Liz, do you want to address that about parasites?
Yeah, I want to address a couple things. One is nothing seems to work. And so when nothing seems to work, then we have to look deeper. And so looking for parasites is one thing. And most doctors will stop with what they call an ova and parasite test, which misses a lot. And so you want to do a more comprehensive test from a lab that's what they specialize in, is really looking for parasites, and that they see them all the time. I once asked a lab director, I go, how do come you find parasites and nobody else does? And he goes, well, first of all, in a basic hospital, they don't do them very often. And they're not really that well trained. He said, so we train our technicians, and we also have really great microscopes, and we also take our time and we really look. I mean, who really wants to look at poop, right? Nobody. But but so to really look and to really look at that, maybe even do genetic testing on it to see if it's there or not there. So I think looking for a root cause of why you don't feel well and nothing seems to work is important. I think that mold exposures for some people can be a reason why nothing seems to work. I think heavy metals or chemicals are another reason why sometimes nothing seems to work. And there's always too, did you have adverse child events? Did you have stress in your life that was never fully resolved, that's keeping you from feeling your very best? Because, we can talk about physiology all day long, but we're so much more than just a physical body. We're an emotional, spiritual body as well. And that those bodies can get stuck also. So in my own practice, I've found sometimes we do all the right things on a physical level and people are stuck. So I would say, keep being curious, definitely do parasite testing, keep looking for why nothing's working, and and keep moving. And your doctor might be saying, well, the food sensitivities are a result of the parasite, right? So when you get rid of the parasite, the food sensitivities might disappear because the inflammation is gone. And so, so I like what your doctor's saying, but I think there's more to it.
Shanquila is asking, why would I feel worse after gluten-free diet for 1+ years?
I don't know. Do you have any ideas about that? I think, Shankio, I would have to know so much more about you before I could even say or
Yeah,
guess.
agreed, agreed. That something else is going on. That doesn't negate that gluten may be a problem, but something else is going on. And a primary mechanism, Shanquil, on why, well, we know that um, it's called the standard mortality ratio. I mean, how likely is it that somebody's going to pass, going to die from something? And if you're diagnosed with celiac disease, you're twice as likely to die early in life compared to someone not diagnosed with celiac disease. The SMR is 2 to 1 on a gluten-free diet. Now, that's pretty shocking by itself. And those studies came out way back in the late 90s and early 2000s. We started seeing that. But then a study came out that showed if you're diagnosed with celiac disease as an adult, you have an 86% increased risk of dying within 1 year of a cardiovascular incident compared to someone the same age not diagnosed with celiac disease. They looked at 350,000 endoscopies and biopsies. That's when they put a tube down and they look in your intestines, snip a little piece and take it out, look at it under a microscope. 350,000 people who were sent to a gastroenterologist with a complaint, and they found 39,000 celiacs. And they followed these people for 25 and 30 years to see what happened to these people. And those that were diagnosed with celiac had an 86% increased risk of a heart attack within a year of that endoscopy compared to the other 300,000 people who also had an endoscopy but weren't diagnosed with celiac. 86% increased risk. And the question is, why? I mean, that's a jaw dropper. What? Why would that happen? And now when you look at it, it makes perfect sense. Because when you're diagnosed with celiac, you go on a gluten-free diet because that's what you have to do. But wheat supplies 81% of the prebiotics in the Western diet, meaning the foods, the fibers that feed the good bacteria in your gut. And when you go on a wheat-free diet, gluten-free diet, wheat-free diet, when you go on a wheat-free diet and you replace it with gluten-free foods are crap. They're just white paste. There's no fiber in those foods. It's not enriched with B vitamins or minerals, whereas wheat is usually enriched. Plus, 81% of the prebiotic in the Western diet comes from wheat. It's called the arabinoxylans in wheat. So wheat's not all bad for you. There's good things about wheat and there's bad things about wheat, but the bad things usually outweigh the good. But there's still good things here. But when you take wheat out of the diet, you have to replace the prebiotics that you now unknowingly have just eliminated. And when you lose the prebiotics to feed the good bacteria die off. And there's so many studies now that show the microbiome of people on a gluten-free diet within 1 month is dramatically different. A whole lot more of the bad guys, nowhere near as many of the good guys. And the diversity of the good guys is reduced on a gluten-free diet. So you have to replace it with prebiotics that are healthy for you. So Dr. Lipski, let's go there. What are some healthy prebiotics that people can use if they're replacing wheat in their diet?
Yeah, I love what you said. 20% of the calories that people eat in the world is wheat. 20%.
Yeah.
So, when you switch to a gluten-free diet, then that means really adjusting a lot about what you eat. And here in the West, we are such a wheat-driven culture, but that's just true more and more all over the world. So I love prebiotics. We used to think prebiotics were just fibers and soluble fibers, things that you find in oats and green peppers and broccoli and potatoes and root vegetables, things like that. And those are really great sources. All your other grains, your quinoa, your millet, your legumes, all of your beans, all of your kind of starchy vegetables. So it's something like an artichoke is just loaded with prebiotics and also really good for your liver. And I kind of love that. But then we started hearing other terms like resistant starch, like when you take a potato or a sweet potato or squash and you cool it down and put it in a salad, it seems to have more of a prebiotic effect than when it's hot. And I'm not exactly sure why that is, but it is. And so thinking about kind of root vegetables like beets and carrots and all of those are prebiotic foods as well. And then we had in 2017 a global consensus statement on prebiotics. And what they started looking at was, yeah, all those fibers and all those resistant starches, they're all prebiotics, but so are the colors in fruits and vegetables and nuts and seeds and beans and grains. The colors, the polyphenols. And so when you eat grapes, you're getting prebiotics. And what I love, excuse me, what I love about this is that they're really codependent on each other. So let's say that I eat grapes, right? The resveratrol that's in those red grapes is pretty inactive in my body until it meets the microbes of my microbiome that start eating it. And as they eat it, they get fed and our microbiome gets more and more robust because the prebiotics are the food for our microbiome. And that's what it needs for this diversity. And the more diverse our diet is, the more diverse our microbes are. But the polyphenols like that resveratrol that's anti-inflammatory and great for memory and brain and anti-aging, until it gets gobbled up, it's 95% inactive. And so they need each other. They're really codependent. They need each other to make each other their best selves so that they can function. And so, some of the other foods that I really love is sea vegetables. So when you have some sushi and it's got nori wrapped around it, or when you take some dulse and you stick that in some soup, or you season, instead of using salt, maybe use some kelp sometime. Those are all prebiotics and really mineral rich as well. And so, the magic is in the plant foods, the diversity of plant foods and the colors in the plant foods. And I could talk all day about prebiotics. I'm just so enamored with them. They're fun. They're fun.
It's the key. It's really the key. If there's only one thing you're going to do, it's build a healthy microbiome. I don't care what disease you've got, build a healthy microbiome. And the way you do that is by alternating the prebiotics and giving yourself lots of prebiotics to feed the good guys. They don't feed the bad guys, they feed the good guys. And I want to take something that Dr. Lipski said and carry it one step further. When she talked about eating some grapes and the resveratrol in grapes, and there's so many studies on how good it is for you, for your brain and your cardiovascular system and your blood vessels, but it's inactive until the good guys in the gut eat it up. When the good guys eat it up, the exhaust of the good guys is called the metabolites of the microbiome. And that exhaust gets into the bloodstream. Professor Schoenfeld, who Dr. Lipski and I both know, tells us 36% of all the small molecules in the bloodstream at any time, 36%, over 1/3 are the metabolites of the good not good, are the metabolites of the bacteria in the gut. And if you have a lot of the bad guys in the gut, you got messengers, the metabolites, the exhaust of the bad guys going up to your brain, throwing your brain hormones called neurotransmitters way out of balance. Here comes depression, or here comes anxiety, because too many bad guys in the gut and their exhaust, the metabolites getting into the bloodstream, are the messengers guiding the body. The geek term is modulate, which means has its hands on the steering wheel of where you're going. And the microbiome modulates your brain function, and it modulates your heart function and your liver function and your kidney function. Do you get the message? So what's more important than the environment of the gut? Nothing. If there's only one thing you're going to do, this is it. So what she just said about prebiotics is so beneficial for all of us to realize, well, I guess I could be using some more prebiotics in my diet every day for me and my family. That would be a really good thing. Now, I'm going to take a couple minutes here and pause on the questions because Dr. Lipski, I want to know about your course. Can you tell us a little about that?
Sure. When I was working on writing the new edition of Digestive Wellness, I kept thinking about how I wanted to put things in the book, but they didn't fit in the book. I wanted to talk about specific research, or I wanted to show enzymes and bitters and talk about how I think about using them, or I wanted to cook and make recipes, or I wanted to show people how to make like dairy-free kefir or how to make kimchi, or I wanted people to really be able to understand all the different diets. And so I said to my husband, I'm going to sit in front of my computer, I'm going to record all these videos, and I'm going to make a course. And Tom, you know Chris, but he's like, no, we're not going to do it that way.
Oh, no, no, right, right. We're going to do it this way. We're going to be much more professional.
Yeah. And so anyway, it came out to be a course, and there's about 10 hours of videos, 28 videos about me talking about what's the microbiome and what's the microbiome and what does it have to do with circadian rhythm, or how do you keep your microbiome healthy, or what's a prebiotic and how do you get those in your diet, or what's a low FODMAP diet and why would you choose that rather than an elimination diet, and where can I find those diets, um, and just starting to look at all the different kind of how-tos. Both of us, we're kind of deep into our profession, and it's like, well, how can I give back? So I created this course called the Art of Digestive Wellness, and it's available, and it's really a course that is designed for people like the people on the call. You're curious about your own health, you're curious about your family's health, and then it's also for clinicians who kind of want to understand more about the interconnections of digestion and why when digestion's not working right, nothing works right. And there's questionnaires, there's handouts, there's recipes, there's over 40 different handouts and questionnaires. So it really gives you kind of a good way to really look at all of this. And I think I sent to your team a link. They have a link
We've
to,
got the link, yes, and it's posted for everyone here.
yeah, because there's also a link to the questionnaire that I put together, which is a great way to kind of figure out, could it be my gallbladder? Could it be my liver? I call it the DHAC, the Digestive Health Appraisal Questionnaire. And so you'll all have access to that too. And that will give you a good starting point to see. But I hope you'll check out the course and see if it's something that interests you.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I highly recommend it. Dr. Liz Lipski is the go-to person in the functional medicine world on how to get your digestive system working from this end to the other end, all the way through. And that's why the book is this thick, right? And
It's not really that thick. It's only
well,
this thick. Maybe.
well, yes,
Let's
I know.
see. It's sitting here. So let's see. How thick is it? Not
Oh
that
my goodness,
thick.
look
It's
at
pretty thick.
it
It's
is
this
pretty
thick. It's this
right, right. It's really great. It is the go-to reference, not just for doctors. I mean, the general public, you will learn so much. If you like reading about this kind of stuff, the language that Liz uses is everyday language with some geeky stuff, but and references to where you can learn more about the geeky stuff, you know, the studies and all that, all the references are there, but it's highly understandable and it just makes sense. And this is the book that we all recommend to our patients and to all new doctors coming out in practice as they want to get a big picture view on digestion. This is
Yeah.
it.
You know, one of the things in the course and also the book that I think is so important, that I was sitting with Dr. Patrick Hanaway in an airport one day, and he said, you know, I think the causes of digestive imbalances are just these few things. And I sat down, I really listened carefully, and I sat down with it and I called him, I go, what if we call this the dig-in model, right? And what you have to look at is, are you digesting your food? Are you absorbing the nutrients? And do you have motility, or is your food stuck somewhere? You know, do you have constipation, or you have diarrhea, or alternating constipation, diarrhea? Do you have a stomach that's not emptying, you know? So that's D. The I is intestinal permeability, which I know Dr. Tom has taught you all about. The G is the gut microbiome, which, as we've said, if it's out of balance, nothing works. I really think its gut barrier, its intestinal permeability, and the microbiome determine whether we have autoimmune conditions or heart disease or type 1 diabetes or pretty much anything. And then looking at inflammation and immune, that's all those food reactions and all the itises. Do you have gastritis? Do you have periodontitis? Do you have irritable bowel, inflammatory bowel syndrome, inflammation anywhere, and all the allergies that people have. And then finally, there's that nervous system, the gut brain. And we're just learning so much more about those relationships of, and we've both seen this in practice over and over. Somebody changes their diet and their brain clears. We see this over and over and over. And I think the biggest changes in mental health treatment are going to come from diet. And I think someday from what we call psychobiotics, which are specific probiotics that work with brain function. And then someday with fecal transplants even. I think, rather than putting people on antipsychotic medications for the rest of their life, we're going to put them on a gluten and dairy-free diet, because we know that men with schizophrenia, that 67% of them on a gluten-free, dairy-free diet in a mental health hospital got improvement.
Yes.
So I think medicine focuses on like all these things that are out here. And what we're always talking about is, how do we just start with the basics? The basics. Do you sleep enough? Do you eat well? Does the food, if you eat well, does the food that you eat agree with you? Do you have friends? Do you have family? Do you have a sense of meaning and purpose in your life? Do you move your body? Like, all of those things are really the basis of health. And I think that's really what both of us are all about, is how do we stay vibrant and healthy and increase our health span?
Amen. Amen to that. That's why we always say, Liz, base hits win the ball game. It's all the little things that we do that accumulatively make the difference. Well, Dr. Liz Lipski, I mean, it's already, the hour's gone. It just goes so fast. And thank you so much for being available. But more importantly, thank you for the work that you do to bring such clarity on this topic of digestion, which is critical to every single one of us. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. It's been my pleasure.
Pleasure. Thank you, everyone. See you next week. Bye-bye.